Welcome to Legends of Nikon, a series where we take a walk down memory lane and pay our respects to the epic glass of old. Today, we don't need to go that far back, and this lens is still incredibly popular and expensive. $2,100 new. Still. Now, to be fair, I've always thought this lens was a little overpriced, but to be fair, again, I never owned it, but I did have the pleasure of using it for a short period of time, and one thing is for sure, you do gotta give it credit. The image results are what make this lens legendary. The Nikon 105mm f1.4e ED launched in 2016 and was the widest aperture 105mm lens to date. It had a complex optical design of 14 elements and 9 groups, 3 of which are ED or extra-low dispersion elements, which helps clean up aberrations. We also got some nanocrystal coating and fluorine on the front and rear elements. It has 9 rounded aperture blades, which was kind of standard at that point, and it was all internal focusing. It had a closest focus distance of 3.3 feet, which is just over 1 meter, and dimensionally it is 3.72 by 4.17 inches, or 94.5 by 106 millimeters. Oh, and by the way, it's a chunky boy. It's just over 2 pounds or 985 grams. At the time, it was Nikon's premier portrait lens, and everything about its design was geared towards that. That would have been the creme de la creme for a dedicated portrait photographer, and at its very high price, probably only justifiable to working folks. For 105mm focal length, this would have been the next step from the 105mm DC, which I have an episode on. You can watch that here. Watch that afterwards though. In use, this lens isn't that fast, but it's a portrait lens, so it doesn't have to be. You trade autofocus speed for precision, and that it was. Precise even at f1.4, and sharp too. Very sharp. And the bokeh, well, what else do you want? It's amazing. I mentioned earlier that I always found this lens to be a little overpriced, but like I said, I didn't use it for weeks. I used it for a very short period of time. It could be similar to the modern portrait monster in my bag, the basically $3,000 Nikkor Z 85mm f1.2s. I'll also say that that's super expensive, but it's kind of hard to argue that price because the results are just unrivaled. If you want the best, the price just kind of is what it is. I want to jump over to Flickr to see what other people are doing with this lens, but first, this lens is still relevant today. So if you're in the market for it, check out the link in the description. It won't cost you anything extra. It just helps this channel put out content consistently. All right, so we are at the Flickr of the Nikon AFS Nikkor 105mm f1.4e ED. Of course, we are going to see a ton of portraits because this is a portrait lens. Right off the bat, I could see great color saturation over here, and I can just see loads of contrast. Now, this is probably done with some flash, which will help with that contrast and that initial beauty, but this was done on the Z6 II. Adapted with a FTZ adapter. We have some good ranges of tones in this black and white. It's matte, a matte edit, which I do like, but that doesn't help us see the true black and white ability of this lens. It really is incredibly dang sharp. Wow. Trying to find one that I can zoom in on. Look at the background on that. Very, very sharp. This one in particular is a little bit noisy. Oh, it's shot on the Nikon F100 on Kodak Gold 200. Not a terrible film. It's not my favorite, but look at the background. No, Zach, you don't need this for your Nikon F5. You don't need it for your Nikon F5. You don't need it for your Nikon F5. You need it for your Nikon F5. No! Bad, Zach. Gorgeous lighting on this, Mr. Alexander Ross. Absolutely gorgeous lighting. Gorgeous colors from the lens, beautiful skin tones. I mean, it's the creme de la creme portrait lens, you know? Look at that. We're even doing a little bit of bug and flower right here. Beautiful, beautiful color. There are instances where I feel like that the contrast that I'm seeing may be from post-processing. I don't know that there's an outrageous amount of contrast in this lens inherently, and that's something that I've always kind of gone back and forth on. This guinea fowl, it reminds me of a bomb pop. What I'm saying about the contrast, though, is I feel like maybe it doesn't have an insane amount of contrast, and maybe that's what's been speaking to me for years, saying that maybe this lens is just a little overpriced, but it is really beautiful. And so maybe it's kind of like a 50mm f1.2 for the Z mount kind of scenario, and like an 85 1.2 kind of scenario where it really is worth the money. It's just kind of like a breathtaking amount of money. None of these are letting me zoom in, but I can see that the sharpness is really, really good. Skin tones are really, really good on this. This is just a very well lit. This guy, Alexander Ross, has a lot of images in here, and he's just killing it. Make sure you guys go and show these photographers some love. This lens at the time had the kitchen sink thrown at it by Nikon lens engineers. Nikon said, screw everything else, it needs to be the best portrait lens the world has. That's kind of what they did. Every brand needs to have something for everyone in all stages of their photography journey at many price points. But sometimes they look at the professionals and artists and say, boy, do I have something that you're gonna have to have. And something like the Nikon 105mm f1.4e, a legend, is born. I'm Z-Wade, the Z-Wade, and Z-Wade Photo. Stay legendary. It won't cost you anything extra. It won't cost you anything extra. In use of this lens, it's